afternoon. My name is Juan Nosa. I am a technical account manager in AWS. I've been working with AWS for 1.5 years. As a technical account manager, my job or my role is to help customers be even more successful in AWS.
Hi, I'm Johnny Hanley. I am a solutions architect on the Well-Architected team. I've been with AWS for about 6.5 years now. I have worked with all levels of customers, from startups to enterprise, in all verticals. And we're here today to help you with improving resiliency with your correction of error process. So as we go through this today, we're going to talk about best practices. And organizations all around are using architectural best practices. And those best practices are helping them to build their workloads and applications in a way that makes them extremely innovative and resilient, right? We want to make sure that even when things go wrong, our applications continue to work, right? We might have component failures underneath, but the business outcome to the customer is still intact. We want to make sure they're rapidly deployable so we can continue to give the customers what they need and the business what it needs at a rapid fashion. And we want to optimize for cost and sustainability. So how do we do that? Well, let's talk through today. One of the things we're going to do, we're going to go through and answer why is the correction of error, why is it important, right? We call it a CoE. Why is this important to you? Then we're going to answer, what is it? What exactly is this correction of error? And we're going to break down the components of the correction of error. We're going to walk through all of them so you understand how they are, what they entail. And then we're going to walk through an example scenario. Now, the example scenario is important because it helps to take things from an academic point of view all the way back into how you can visualize yourself using this correction of error process to do the things you need to do to learn from failures and make improvements. Then we're going to do a demo. And in that demo, we're actually going to walk through an example scenario. And Juan is going to take the time to walk you through all of it and see what that thought process looks like, what that conversationally, how it happens. And then we're going to do a demo in Systems Manager. There are many places that you can document your CoE process, and any of those is fine. If you want to use one of the tools that AWS provides, we have something in Systems Manager. It's called Incident Manager. And I'm going to walk you through a demo today about how that works so you can get a real good feel for exactly what we're talking about. Then we're going to talk about some additional resources that you can use to move forward, right? So we're going to keep walking through all these processes, and then we're going to show you other things that you can use going forward and how to go ahead and actionalize the things that we're talking about today. Werner Vogels famously says, everything fails all the time, right? And what he means is, because components are always going to fail, especially at scale and in the fullness of time, you need to take the time to build your applications and your architecture so they can withstand that failure so that your business outcomes aren't affected. Jeff Bezos is quoted as saying that good intentions never work. You need good mechanisms to make things happen, right? So we want to make sure that we're taking a look at the tools, adopting, inspecting. We want to have this flywheel to be able to make things happen. It's not enough to just have good intentions. And so back to our flywheel for the correction of error process, right? At Amazon, we love our flywheels. So talking about the uptime flywheel, we're going to start over here on the right-hand side in the detect phase, right? When something goes wrong, the first thing we have to do is we have to know that it's happening. We have to detect it. After that, we're going to try to respond to that. We're going to figure out what's happened, what's gone wrong, and then we're going to try to respond and try to mitigate that and try to remediate those problems and stop that pain. Then we want to learn from that, right? Once we've gone through and we've figured out what's wrong, we've stopped the pain, we got to learn from that because we don't want it to happen again. And then we're going to make improvements based on that learning. But back between learning and improving comes the CoE process. And what we want to do here is we want to decouple from the actual outage. We don't want to start the CoE until after we've already remediated the problem. We want to stop the pain for the customer, and we want to make sure we get back to normal business operations. Once we've done that, then we're going to start to go through this process, and we're going to start to examine exactly what happened. We're going to try to really figure out, how could we have avoided this? And if we couldn't avoid it, how could we mitigate it quicker? and make it a much better experience for the customer. And that's going to prepare us for the next time, right? The next time we come through this process and we start to see maybe this occurs again, but the next time we're ready for it. So either we have automation in place that can automatically remediate it and stop it before there's a customer impact, or we can make a less painful process, right? So that the business impact is much less because we're much quicker to react. So why is the correction of error process so important, right? This CoE process. Why should we care? Well, the benefits of this correction of error process. The first thing we want to do is identify root cause and the remediation path. Well, that happens most of the time anyway, doesn't it? I mean, as people are going along and as something goes out, you've got to figure out what happened in order to fix it. So that's going to take place. But once that's done, some things that people don't usually do is document that and then share that knowledge. If we don't share the knowledge, then what happens is every time somebody leaves, either on vacation or if they take another job, we lose that knowledge. And then the next time this event happens, we're doomed to go through the same outcome again. And we don't want that. So we want to make sure that we're learning, we're documenting, and we're sharing all of the knowledge that we acquire. Then we want to implement and make improvements, right? Because the name of the game here is continually improving our workload architecture so that over time, we get better and better. We have automatic mitigations, and then we have things that are going to help us so that we're no longer having to deal with the same outcomes. So what is a correction of error? You know, we talked about why it should matter, but what exactly are we talking about? It's a mechanism, right? We said we needed mechanisms. Good thoughts aren't enough. We need mechanisms. So this is a mechanism to identify and fix our problems. Then we're going to drive ownership and action items, right? So we're going to make sure that we know who's the owner, and then we're going to drive those action items of improvement. And we're going to maximize our lessons learned, and we're going to continue to share that lesson with others. And the whole purpose of this is to prevent the problem from recurring, right? We want to make sure that we don't have to relive the same outcome. Even if we continue to have failures underneath, we want to make sure that we have more resilience built into our workload. And the most important thing here is that this is not going to work if we're living in a world with a culture of blame or punishment. When we think about what went wrong, we want to think about it factually, exactly what went wrong. We don't worry about whose responsibility that was at this point. We're not here to say who should have not let this happen. What we want to do is get into the mindset of having people feel like they're helping us with the solution, as opposed to worrying about blame or worrying about who's causing a problem. We want to worry about who is bringing the solutions to us. And until we do that, and until we have a blame-free environment where we're only talking about facts, and we incentivize people to bring forward the knowledge of where we can improve, then we won't be able to do this successfully. Because oftentimes, the people who have the most knowledge about where we can improve also happen to be the people that are closest to what happened. And if we're blaming people, they're not going to feel comfortable coming forward, and we're not going to get that information, and we're not going to iterate and move forward. So it's really important. So when is a correction of error necessary? We talked about what it is and why it's important. We went through what you use, and now we want to talk about when it's necessary. So whenever we have a customer impacting event, right? I mean, that's pretty standard. Anytime you have an outage, you're going to have people going through a process to try to figure out what went wrong. So we want to do that here anytime there's an impacting event. But we want to take it a step further, and we want to be proactive as well, right? So we have what we call a procedural a missed test case, right? So as we have a procedure that happens, and we expect as I go through and I perform these certain actions, then this other action is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, something went wrong with our procedure. And that's an area we want to learn from. So we want to go back through our correction of error, and we want to try to figure out what went wrong. Why didn't we have the procedure having the steps that we expected? And then there's a process miss, which is a missed use case. So we do a proof of concept, we run through it, all the things technically happen as expected, but we don't get the business outcome that we expected, right? We go through, we have a hypothesis, we do it all right, we nail it, we're waiting for that great outcome, and it never happens. Why not? Where did we go wrong? What expectations did we have that were wrong? So that's another time to look through a correction of error process. And then, of course, any incident that reveals an opportunity for improvement. This is all about improving. It's all about trying to learn from things that are happening. So if there are opportunities for growth, we want to take advantage of those, and we want to learn as much as we can. So who owns the correction of error, right? We talked a little bit about this earlier. We talked about making sure that we're incentivizing people to come forward with solutions. So the first thing we're going to start with is the beneficiaries of the lessons learned. And what does that mean? There's people that could most benefit from the lessons that we learned from this outcome, and we want to make sure that they're part of the process. Not only because we need their information, but they're the ones that are going to be able to learn and improve their processes. So the team where the root cause belongs. It's an interesting way to say it, but we're trying really hard and to be very specific about the root cause belongs in an area, and not that that team was responsible for that. Because again, it's not about what the cause was from a person's responsibility point of view. It's about facts and what are the solutions going to be and who are we going to have helping us to bring those solutions to bear. So wherever the root cause belongs, we want to make sure those people are involved. They're the ones that probably have the most knowledge about where we can improve, and that's the goal. Single or multiple COEs, right? A lot of times you have an outage and you may have a cause that causes the symptoms that the customer experienced. But underneath that, you might find that there are a lot of other areas for improvement. There might be other dependencies or other things that we took for granted that didn't work the way we thought they would, that need to be readdressed, that need to be corrected. And so there might be a single one, or there might be multiple of these correction of error processes all tied into one outcome, one event. And then also there might be cross-team, right? With those dependencies across those areas, we might have to talk to other teams and try to see the integration of our tool sets and try to have different area owners that might be part of one COE, and so that we're communicating across those areas. So some general tips for writing a COE, right? As we're going through our correction of error process and we're writing it out, there's a couple things we want to think about. First off and foremost, you need to gather your data while it still exists, right? We don't start the correction of error process until after the event is already over, right? There's no more customer pain. We've already mitigated. Now we're going back and we're doing post-mortem analysis. But it's also important when we do this that we do it with urgency, because there may be logs or other kinds of metrics that may not persist eternally. They may only be around for some finite period of time, maybe 30 days. And if we don't go through and gather that data while it exists, then we may not have access to that data. So we've got to have a sense of urgency. And then we're going to go through and we're going to reference, right? We're going to look at root cause, action items, and lessons learned. We want to reference all of that information to make sure that we've captured it. And we're going to standardize our timestamps. It's imperative when we go through this that we understand exactly the order of events as they happen. And what that means is we might have things across time zones. So we have to make sure that we standardize on a time zone, so that as we're going through and we're saying these events happened in this order, we know exactly what came first and exactly how long it took before the next one followed. Including links is important as well, because we have different data sources. And so as we have links to the data that we show in our reports, we want to be able to allow people to follow those links to the raw data if they'd like. So let's talk now conceptually about the components inside the correction of error. We're going to break this down into what happened and then the learning and action that comes from it. So starting with the supporting information of what happened. We're going to start with the summary. And we're going to dive into all of these in a moment. So I'm not going to go into depth right this second. But we're going to start with the summary, which is an executive summary about what happened. We follow that with the impact. And this is the order that you'll see it in the report. The impact is, what was the customer impact? The timeline, exactly what happened from the beginning, or maybe even before the event, all the way through how we found out about it, when it started to improve, when we know that things were back to pre-incident levels, and then when it was concluded. Metrics. If we don't have metrics, we're just guessing. We have to be able to prove that what we think was happening was actually happening. It's not just a hypothesis, we have proof. Incident questions. This is how we figure out what happened. This is how we diagnose it, how we troubleshoot. That process of going through and trying to figure out what happened, how we fix it, those types of things, those are the questions. And then we switch over to our lessons learned, right? What are the corrections that we can make? This event's already happened, we can't change that. But we can learn as much as we can from it and make improvements so that going forward, we either can make sure this never happens again, or if it does, we have remediations already in place and automation so that we limit the impact to our customers. We have a process called the 5 whys. We're going to go through that. I'm going to say why a lot in this conversation. And if we were somewhere else and we were playing a game, there might be a lot of action to take every time I say why. But for the purpose of today, the whys are just helping us to dive deeper and deeper into the root cause. And then we have action items, right? Once we learn something, we've got to do something with it, or else it's an exercise in futility. So what are we going to do? What action are we going to take with the lessons we learn and the knowledge that we gain from this outage? And finally, we need to know what items are related, right? We're going to have a report here that's going to show all the different things and the areas that we could improve. But there may be other things that have taken place in the recent past that also are necessary to correlate. This may have happened before, or other things that may impact the knowledge set that we're building. So we want to write and make links to other related ideas and actions. All right, we're going to dive into all of these. So we're going to start with a summary. In the summary, in the paper or the documentation that you have, it's going to come first. But it should be the last thing you write, because you need to have all the information that you gather from the other sections before you can write an executive summary. We'll dive into that more later. You're going to highlight the what, the where, and the why. If someone were to read just that sentence, just that paragraph, they should be able to tell exactly what happened, why it was bad, what the impact was, right? This is for your executives. That's what they care about. You want to reference the root cause, and you want to outline all the details. We're not going to go into incredible depth because there are other sections for that. But we are going to introduce the systems that were involved, and we're going to spell out acronyms the first time they're mentioned. It's really clear, so everybody's on the same page. No matter what their starting point of knowledge is, they can go through this and gain all the knowledge they need. This should be very concise, right? It's an executive summary. It should be quick. It should get all the points that somebody needs in an elevator type pitch. So moving on to impact. This is going to be a paragraph about the customer impact of the event. So who was impacted, right? Who felt the impact of this outcome? And what was their customer experience? That's really what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to the customer experience so we can understand what this outage felt like to the customers. And then how long did it last, right? So talking about the customer experience, talking about how it felt, you got to know how long it lasted. And we want to quantify everything, right? We're really trying to understand exactly what happened. And we're trying to quantify it so that we can use metrics and other different ways to figure out when things were going wrong, when things were recovering and going right again. And it's really important because going forward, we're going to use those metrics and continue to use the metrics and the lessons that we learned to try to put actions in place the next time we start to see these same metrics or start to see things trending in the same direction. And we want to cast a wide net. And the reason is we want to make sure we capture all the information that we can capture from this outage. We want to make sure we gain as much information as we can so that if it happens again, we've already learned as much as we can learn from this event and we've made all the improvements that were possible. So as we go through our timeline, we're going to talk through some do's and don'ts. We do want to use a bulleted list, right? All the essential moments we're going to capture in a bulleted list. We want to use links where they're relevant so that we understand how to get to the raw data. It's extremely important to use a consistent timeline. I know I've already said this a couple of times. I'm going to keep saying it. We want to make sure that we're including the time zone, a consistent time zone, and we're going to include the year. So that way, as we're using this as a reference point going backward, maybe it's going to be used as a related item to another COE, but we want to make sure that people understand exactly when and where things happened, what the order was of how these things took place. And we want to highlight the critical times. As we notice that the workload might start to have problems, or when the customer started to have noticeable impact, when customers started to complain, those types of things are really important to know, because then as you see your metrics for the future, you know as they go when these things start to happen. And so you know how much time you have, or you can see that trend happening and you can act accordingly. Things not to do. We don't want to use anybody's names, right? We're trying not to apply any blame. It's not about who. It's only about facts and what. We're not editorializing. We're not trying to say so-and-so should have done something better. I told you so. It's all about just saying this happened factually. And then we all work together to try to figure out what we could do better, and everyone has the opportunity to be part of the solution. We want to make sure that we do not expose any personally identifiable information. We're gathering a lot of information for this report, and we're trying to make sure that we put it into a format that can be consumed. It's imperative that we make sure there's no PII in that information. We don't want to be verbose. We want to be very concise with everything we're doing here. This is a report people are going to consume. It's a reference material. We're not expanding with editorialization. It's factual and it's very concise. And we want to make sure that there aren't any major gaps in time, right? We have to make sure we're documenting what was taking place. We're not making any assumptions, and we're leaving no room for assumptions by making sure there are no major gaps. We need metrics, right? We talked a little bit before about if we don't have metrics, we can't prove it. We're just guessing. So we want to show the impact, not only the impact as it was happening, but also the recovery. And so we need metrics to show that. We need to show that that trend was going poorly. And then when that trend started to turn and it started to recover, we want to show that too. And then be able to have the metrics to show when we had a complete recovery. We want to quantify this information, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out exactly how I can prove it using my metrics, so I can show, not from anecdote, but from actual facts that I can track and metrics that I can tag, so that in the future, I might be able to automate responses based on our metrics. If you're using graphs, we need to make sure that we use consistent timescale. We want to make sure that the graphs correlate nicely together, and so our timescales on the axes have to be consistent so that the message is consistent and we can make proper assumptions based on the graphs. We need to include explanations, and we want to identify all of the critical events so that as we're going through the graph, we can see exactly when events started to happen, and it helps to bring it into reality so that it's showing us here's where it started to go wrong, here's where it started to improve. The incident questions that we're going to go through here. This is how we're analyzing. How do we know when it happened, right? We're going to start it with detection. How do I know when something started to go wrong? How did I detect the problem? When did you learn about the customer impact? When did you find out that something was going wrong? And how? How did you learn there was customer impact? How did you learn that the customer was in pain or was having a bad day? And then how do we reduce that time in half? How do we reduce the time to find out whether the customer was in pain, or how we can figure out what the impact was? How do we reduce that time in half so next time we have a quicker resolution? And then once we know what happened, how do we diagnose it? What's the underlying cause of the customer impact? These are the questions we're going to ask ourselves. What's the internal activities? Were there any internal activities? For example, did we have perhaps a maintenance window that was going on at the same time? Was there something happening that we knew ahead of time was increasing the risk of some kind of an outage? And if there is, then we should be taking advantage of that knowledge by having people readily available to troubleshoot, so we can decrease the time it would take us to troubleshoot, right? The next question, how do we reduce that time in half? That's what we keep asking ourselves. Every time we're going through something, the purpose of this is to be able to do it faster next time. Gather information to get us more knowledge so we can do it faster next time. And then mitigation. Once I know that there was a problem, and once I've figured out exactly what it was, how do I fix it? We need to know when the customer impact returned to pre-incident levels. In other words, when were we back to normal, so that we know the steps we took to get there? How does the system owner know that the system is properly restored? Are we guessing? Or do we have metrics that can show us exactly what happened? And then how do you determine where and how to mitigate the problem? You had to go through the process of fixing the problem while it was down. So capturing all that information to figure out how we did that troubleshooting, and then what we did to mitigate once we figured it out. Keeping track of all that information to help us to make playbooks and help us to make run books that are going to help us to move forward much, much faster, perhaps with automation in the future. And how do we reduce the time to mitigate in half? You'll see a pattern here. We need to start to make this actionable so that we can improve based on the events that happened. So the 5 whys, we talked about there are going to be a lot of whys, and here they come. The 5 whys are here to help us not only figure out what the symptoms were caused by, right? That first level of pain that causes the customer outage, but getting to the root of the problem further down. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. The first thing we want to do, we're going to try to identify root causes, right? One of the reasons we do 5 whys is to identify the root causes. Then we want to build a causal chain. We want to start to understand and reference the items and other lessons that we've learned and identify the process and failures, right? We want to really dive deep. We want to be prepared for multiple root causes or contributing causes. In other words, there may be one thing that we see and okay, this is what the customer saw, but under that, there might be other dependencies. There might be other things that were depending on other sources that went down. And those are things we need to figure out, because there might be other things we can do in the future that we can learn, lessons we can learn of other dependencies that'll help us to become extremely resilient going forward based on this one outage. We want to be concise, right? We want to make sure as we're asking these questions, we're very, very precise about what we're talking about so we can get to a very exact answer and they can be actionable. We're not here to justify. It doesn't matter at this point why, right? We're not making excuses. It happened. And then why did it happen? Because this happened. All factual. And the purpose of that is we're going to get action items out of it, right? We're going to try to figure out who can implement what fixes and when are they going to do it. We're trying to prevent reoccurrence so that this never happens again. We're coordinating with all the different owners of this correction of error so that we can all work together to figure out the best way to implement improvements. We want to maintain a sense of urgency because it's about action and improvement. And we want to take that action and improvement as fast as we can and drive that to completion so that we don't have these issues again. And we want to deliver our results quickly, right? The worst thing we could do is come to a conclusion, figure out what went wrong, get all the information and not act on it. And then it happens again. And they say, well, why didn't you? I thought you knew what happened. I did. I thought you knew how to fix it. I did. Why did it happen again? I didn't do anything about it. We need to make sure we deliver our results quickly. And because of that, we need owners and dates on all of the action items. It's non-negotiable. We can change who those owners are. We can change what those dates are, but we need to have somebody who owns each action item and a date that they're expecting to deliver that so that we can drive towards completion. And if those change, that's fine. But we need to have people that have ownership. And then we want to make sure at the bottom of the report we have related items. We talked a little bit about this before. There might be other information that you need to know that isn't in this report. So we want to link to other correction of error reports or other things that might be information outside of this report that we need to reference. Did something like this happen before? Is this a series of events? And are there pending actions from other COEs that we didn't complete? Right? Other things that we already knew about that we should have completed that we didn't, and as a result, we're living this existence again. So now we're going to go through an example scenario. In a moment, I'm going to hand you off to Juan, and he's going to talk about taking this from something academic, where we're just talking theoretically about what we should be doing, and then we're going to take it and we're going to put an example on it, and he's going to walk you through the process so that you can understand exactly how to execute it and what that might look like for you. Take it away, Juan.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Okay, before we do the actual demo, I just created a sample application here just to have a common ground. Our application is a simple application that any given user uploads a JSON formatted file into a bucket that triggers transformation lambda, and that transformation lambda uploads the information into a Dynamo table and then creates a new CSV file and stores it in a different bucket. Now, what happened in this scenario? The application team launched the application. Users were using the application and they were happy, but at some point, customers start calling the contact center, complaining that they were uploading the information, but then they were not able to find it in the database, nor in the CSV S3 bucket. Now the contact center called the service team again. The service team started to investigate. All the metrics were perfect, so the service team need to do a deeper investigation. Now the service team fix the application, and let's do the correction of error document. Okay, as Johnny mentioned, the summary is the first part of the document, but we are going to write it last. Now for the impact. Remember, this needs to be extremely concise. So for this example, what happened? Over 10,000 files that were processed were not successfully transformed. The customers were receiving a successful message, but the data never reflected in the application, and the exact time the event started and when the service team resolved it. It's all in the impact. Now for the timeline, I'm not going to read it, just very important information here. The timestamp, you have the actual time zone, and the day. And what happened, and it's short, and it's concise, and it's factual, again, and we are not blaming anybody here. Now, for the metrics, the service team originally had this metric, a QDEF, for the documents to be processed and the percentage of documents to be processed. After doing the review, they proposed additional metrics: the transformer lambda error rate and the number of DynamoDB updates per period. Now for the incident questions, could you, Johnny, help me over here, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Now for the detection part, Johnny, when did you learn there was a customer impact?
At 9:45 a.m. GMT -5.
How did you learn there was a customer impact?
The call center called the service team to let us know that customers have been complaining.
Nice. How can we reduce the time to detecting half?
If we had better metrics and analytics of those metrics so we could see the trends.
Okay. Now for diagnosis, Johnny, what was the underlying cause?
Poor data validation and error exception in the application.
What was an internal was there an internal activity going on?
There was, because we knew we were going to be deploying this application, and so we had a deployment into production happening during this time period.
How can we reduce the time to diagnose in half?
Well, again, better metrics and analytics. Same.
Okay. Now for the mitigation part, Johnny. When did the customer impact return to pre-incident levels?
11/38/24, and that was GMT -5.
How does the system owner know that the system is properly restored?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't for this scenario. So we would propose in the future some newly created metrics for transformer lambda error rates and the number of DynamoDB error rates per
now,
period.
How did you determine where and how to mitigate the problem?
Well, we had to go and check through all the logs. So when we were going through all the logs, we were able to determine where it was.
And how can we reduce the time to mitigate in half?
Again, better metrics and analytics.
Okay. Now, for the 5 whys, the idea, again, is to determine or find the root cause. Johnny, can you help me again here?
Sure.
Johnny, why did the application crash?
The uploaded files never showed up in the application.
Now, why didn't the uploaded files show in the application?
There was a transformer lambda that didn't update the database.
Why didn't the transformer lambda update the database?
The transformer lambda execution had an error.
Why did the transformer lambda return an execution error?
There was an invalid data type.
And why didn't the application gracefully handle invalid data types?
Well, the application didn't even know there was an error.
Why didn't the application know there was an error?
There were no metrics to capture the transformer lambda execution errors.
Now, for our example, 6 questions were enough, but you can keep asking and asking until you find the actual root cause. Now, for the action items, we have update the runbook for this incident and propose new metrics. You can see the metrics. And also we can update the application awareness. As you can see, the owner of the application, of the action items is the service team, and they have a due date. For this example, there are no related items. This is a new application we're talking about. And for the summary, I'm not going to read, but it's important for you to notice that it's short, it's concise, and there's no blame. Now, this is how it looks, the application, after it was corrected. Johnny, can you walk us through the demo?
All right. So we're going to do a demo here. We showed you how to go ahead and do this through on paper as a report. And now what we're going to do, we're going to switch over and we're going to show you there are many tools that you could use, and any of them would be fine. But if you wanted to use a tool in AWS, in the console, under Systems Manager, there's something called Incident Manager. And I'm going to go ahead and walk you through documenting this in Incident Manager. Now, some of the conversation you would still have to do to go through the process like they did, but now we're going to go ahead and start a new incident. So inside of Incident Manager, you'll notice if I start an incident, the first thing it does is it asks me for a response plan. So a response plan is something that we're going to go create now because I can't do it without it. But a response plan is going to allow me to go ahead and create, for this type of error, what would we do? And then we'll come back here in a moment and we'll do an incident for what happened. This is more like a template, this response plan. So let's go look at one of those. So if I go into response plans and I go ahead and create one, it's going to ask me for a name. Now this first name it's a technical name, so it's not going to have any spaces or special characters. So what happened? We said we had a transformer lambda error. So in here, remember, this is going to be kind of a referenceable for the error itself, not necessarily for the incident, but the underlying root cause. And you'll see why in a minute. So we're going to say the transformer lambda error. All right. Whoops, I can't have any spaces. I just said that. So let's go ahead and take those out. And then we have a human readable one, so that's where I could put spaces. All right, then that's the name that we're having for this type of response plan, this type of error, right? This template of errors. And then we're going to go through and we're going to say, if we were to choose this template, what would the defaults be? So a default title. Now, each title we did for an incident, we would hope would have the date in it. So we're going to probably override this and never actually choose the default. But there will be an option. So we will say, so for this, it might be a, let's call it a Lambda incident. I'm just going to put date because I want people to write the date. Now the impact, most of the times this happens if the customer isn't getting their updated files, they're going to be critical. So I'm going to put critical. And under a summary, I'm going to say customer did not see their uploaded files in the application. Right? Pretty descriptive. And then I'm going to go down here. Now, I'm not going to fill these out for now, but chat channel. That has the ability to go ahead and push something into either Chime or Slack, right? Some kind of notification channel. Down lower, I also have options for engagements. So how do I do escalations, right? And inside of that, I have the ability to create escalation paths or even individual contacts. So we can automate now how we're going to escalate these things. Who needs to get notified? Right now, we're just doing a template, so I'm not going to do that. But it shows you that after you build your templates, as you come back, you can create automation to help you get through these issues quicker, to mitigate faster, notify. Down below, there's even an option for a run book. In Systems Manager, you can create a run book that'll go ahead and allow you, it's basically an automated script that you can create, and then you can have it triggered at certain times. For the purpose of what we're doing right now, we wouldn't have already known what our results are going to be, so we wouldn't do this yet. But I might come back to it later, and I might update it when I know what my mitigations and improvements are going to be, so that if it happened again, that it could automatically run some automation. And if I did that, I'd have to set the permissions for that. So I'm going to go ahead and create this response plan, and then I'm going to go back to Incident Manager like we talked about before. Right now, I don't have any open incidents. So I'm going to start one. And when I go to that, I have to pick a response plan. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and pick Transformer Lambda error is the one we did. I have the option to create a new title or just to take the default title. Now, the default title didn't have a date, and I'd like a date in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and say, now this is about the incident itself. So Transformer error, Lambda error. I'm going to say incident because it's not about the error, it's about the whole incident. And I'm going to put the date, 4/1/2022. And the impact, I can go ahead and pick what the default was. I'm going to put in critical. The default was critical, so it's the same outcome, but maybe it wouldn't have been. I don't want to rely on the defaults. And now I've opened one. Now you'll notice it started a timeline. If I had already created my response plan before, and I was really mature in using this tool, then as the incident happened, I could use it to track those times. But because we're doing this retrospectively now, and I'm just using it to document what happened, I'm going to go ahead and create some timelines. And I'm going to look, I've got my example timeline pulled up on the other side here. And so I'm going to go ahead and create in my timeline. Now you'll notice the timeline automatically has UTC -5. Now the reason that's there is because it's pulled it off of my computer. So if the time zone doesn't match what your computer says, then you got to change the time zone in your computer to make sure this is going to be properly for posterity. That's something that we could improve, but for today, that's how that's set. So I can go ahead in there, I can click add, and then it's going to ask me the date. So I'm going to go through April 1st, 2022. It's going to ask me the time. I'm going to go ahead and start with our first event here. And the first thing, and I'm doing that in 24-hour time. It happens to be the morning, so it's the same. But this is when the application was pushed to production. Okay? So I'm starting even before something went wrong. right? Then I'm gonna go through, I'm not gonna do all of them today, but you'd go through and put every single thing that happened. I'm gonna do a couple of them here. So at 9:25, we had engineers verifying the dashboards were correct. So the metrics look good. We go ahead and add that. And I'll do one more just for the interest of time, because we got to get to where the problem actually starts, right? So on April 1st at 9:38:18, and notice I'm including not only the seconds, but all the way out to the digits, because I want to make sure we're very precise and we know exactly what happened when, what came first. So this is when our transformer errors started to increase, right? So I'm basically walking through and I'm putting everything in from the timeline that Juan had told you. Again, I'm not going to keep going all the way down, but I would keep going all the way down. I'm going to show you other things you can do in here. You can assign metrics. Okay? There are ways to create metrics. All of this ties into CloudWatch. And so I can either pick metrics from a CloudWatch dashboard that I already created, or I can take them from CloudWatch metrics themselves. I have created some on a dashboard. I've created this example dashboard. In there, I only have one metric. It's top 10 Lambda function error by count. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. These are things that you can add. And then as you're building this out, all of this integrates with other things in Systems Manager and other ways that we can start to monitor, right? We talked about those metrics. Okay? If I wanted to add runbooks, I could add runbooks here. I could start a runbook if I had one already created. We talked about being able to create runbooks for these processes. If I wanted to start one now, I could, and it would go ahead and maybe mitigate in my environment, and then it would track what happened. We talked about engagements, where they go ahead and do notifying people, right, or other areas. And then I can tag related items in here, just like if we had one. We don't have one, so I'm not going to. The property just goes down all of the different AWS resource names and types and things like that. And then we've got our overview. I can edit that anytime I want. When I'm done with it, I can just click Resolve Incident, and it'll let me resolve it. And then historically speaking, it keeps track of it. So in my incident managers down here under resolved incidents, we would see one that was just created, and it's this top one, right? So that's one way that you can do it, and all of that ties into the rest of Systems Manager. I'm not going to go into all the details in the rest of System Manager, but all that information is captured, and it can start to be interoperable. So there's a lot more cool things that you can do. But that's one way to track all of the things that we talked about in the CoE. And now I'm going to switch back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some additional resources. So now we've talked about how you can do best practices for a correction of error, right? As we go through these architectural best practices, there are other areas that you can take advantage of. Those best practices came from the Well-Architected framework. Inside of the Well-Architected framework, there is all kinds of other information that will give you best practices and other things that you can use. One of those things you can use to assess whether or not your workload is following those best practices is called the Well-Architected Framework Review. There's a well-architected tool that it uses that's inside of the console. It's free and available for everyone, and it has a set of questions it asks that as you're answering those questions, it starts to flush out whether or not the best practices are in place and where there's room for improvement. Another thing you could take a look at is this AWS Solutions. And what that is these are solutions that were already built and vetted by AWS. Right? They might be built by other people as well, but they're all vetted by AWS. And these are things that are going to maybe give you proof of concept or maybe show you how something's done. They even have CloudFormation scripts, so they go ahead and install it in a proof of concept without any heavy lifting. Other areas you can go, if you're trying to get some more skills, you can go to AWS Skill Builder. This is an area you can go for labs and learnings, right? There's over 500 free digital courses to help you to learn. And these are things you can go and start to learn a lot about all the things that are going on. And then there's AWS certifications where you can take that to the next level and go ahead and get certified. So we want to thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time. Again, my name is Johnny Hanley. This is Juan Osa. This is where you can find us. We're both on LinkedIn. You can also find us on Twitter. And so we really want to thank you for your time today. And I'd ask that you please complete the survey. It's really important that we understand all the things that we did well and the things that maybe we have room for improvement ourselves so we can continue to get better.